Right, hello everyone. I'm just waiting for Harry to pick up the call and join. Here he is.
And
Look at that view. Your camera's facing the wrong way, Harry.
there we go.
Hello, mate. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks, dude. How are you doing?
I'm awesome. I just stepped out of a salon.
Sponsored by Weller.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been my dream to have Viking hair like that, but I can't do it. I look like I've got a crash helmet on when I grow my hair out.
Once it gets long enough, it'll be all right. I dare you.
Anyway, look, I think people are joining, so we'll just crack on. Welcome to everyone that's tuned in. There's been loads of support on the Instagram stories. I've had loads of questions come through. Just to give a little rundown, this is an idea that me and a friend Peter had. There's going to be a series of 6. I'm really happy that Harry, you decided to join me on the first one. There's going to be one every couple of weeks. We've got 6 really awesome people. The general theme is kind of EQ based, but also it's about us. It's about freediving in general. We can cover loads of stuff, but yeah, there's a general sort of overarching theme of EQ. So, I mean, first of all, why don't we start? Where are you, Harry? That looks very tropical, or is that just a poster on your wall?
No, this is my new freediving center here in La Ventana. Well, mine and Tanya's. It's in southern Baja. So Baja is on the west coast of Mexico, just south of California. And we set up this place, and we're here up and running this year, getting some beautiful, amazing conditions, seeing amazing marine life. It's like 30 degrees in the water, no current, no waves, no wind. It's really perfect conditions. So at the moment, we're doing some coaching here and offering like training for people for this month and next month, and then next season from May until November. We'll be up and running full time with our counterballast on the platform and everything. So super exciting.
Do you need a safety diver?
You're welcome anytime.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely on my list next year. Let's see what happens next year. But it would be a dream to come out there and see it. Yeah. Okay, so did you? Let's just start. We'll just crack into some of the questions that I got sent through the Instagram stories, I think. And we'll see if we can potentially help some people out. So in no particular order, like there's a first question here from someone called Han _Wri, W-R-I. I don't know how to pronounce that. Han. I'm just going to call him or her Han.
All right.
And this is a question about the soft palate, which I thought might be an interesting one for us to start with. The question is the soft palate and its connection to the larynx, tongue, mouth position. I think we might need to decipher that question a little bit.
Is that it? That's the whole question.
Yes.
I don't know.
What do you think she means? Well,
I don't know.
No, that's a tricky one to start with, actually. The soft palate and its connection to the tongue and the mouth. Obviously, she's perhaps experiencing the soft palate getting in the way. It is a common complaint, you know, a common complaint. People complain about having air, and perhaps they can't get it up into their ears to equalize with.
Yeah, it's true. Like everybody always talks about their soft palate, right? And
yeah,
but I think often it's misdiagnosis. Quite often, it's not like solely the soft palate that's the issue. Normally, it would be the tongue and the soft palate.
Yeah.
But like it tends to be, you know, like the general advice like an instructor or a friend will give. Maybe your soft palate's closed. You know, it's just like the easy go-to.
Yeah.
I think it's like quite rare actually that people independently seal the soft palate, and normally not being able to equalize, like it's other things. But I'd say like how it's connected, it's independent. It can be independent, but it often moves like in conjunction with all the other parts of the mouth and throat and tongue and all this.
Yeah, but I think I completely agree with your point about misdiagnosis. It's an easy thing. People just say, "Oh, you soft palate," where actually it's. I think, in my experience anyway, with people I work with, it's the tongue. It's the tongue that is not behaving itself. It's an unruly tongue that comes up, and it causes a block. And if people continue going down, it causes that vacuum, and it can't be fixed. There's just no way to kind of pull that down and open it again.
Yeah.
The only way is to stop the dive and go up again to relieve the
Yeah.
pressure.
Yeah, and the same would be like if we're talking about in Frenzel equalization, the problem is often not soft palate closing up, it's often running out of air behind the tongue, right? So
Yeah.
it's all about, do you have the right air and are you compressing the air in the correct way, whether we're talking about Frenzel or whether we're talking about mouthful, right? So often if people aren't cycling air, so cycling air means bringing air from the lungs past the glottis and trapping the air above the glottis, right? So if people aren't cycling the air on time, even let's just say they're using Frenzel and the air starts to run out, then naturally the tongue is going to start to come up as you're running out of volume behind the tongue. This is the back of the tongue, this is the soft palate, until there's just a full connection. And the problem is not the soft palate is closing. The problem is there's no air. You didn't cycle the air like in time, or you're not capable of cycling air at that depth. Or it's the end of your equalization, right? Like maybe you did an end charge or your reverse pack, and then you're just using what air is left. That air is not going to last forever, right? We're moving through pressure. Any volume of air in our body is going to be compressed. And then the end of that feels like the tongue is stuck against the soft palate, right? It's the suction.
Yeah. I think that's probably what she's referencing in that slightly cryptic question. So hopefully we've helped Han. Let's move on to another question. Okay, this is an interesting one. This is for Orendon. What to do dry to not lose my depth and EQ adaptations for those not living near to the sea? This was my situation for many years. I discovered this absolute passion for free diving, but I was stuck living in London and diving twice a year if I was lucky, you know. So yeah, it became, I had to put all my energies into sort of dry work, basically. You work with you work with a lot of people in all walks of life. Some of your people are sort of landlocked. Some of your students. So what kind of things would you recommend someone who's sort of stuck in a city for months at a time?
Well, now we're in a moment where we have like some really cool equalization tools, right? So the bubbler is probably one of the most effective tools. I'd say it's the most useful tool for both Frenzel and mouthfill. So probably people, if they don't know what the bubbler is, they've at least seen pictures of these long transparent tubes, and people are like blowing
like
bubbles out of the tube. I think that's a great method of training, and just to keep everything familiar and continue to like fine tune and build like awareness and control. At the moment, all bubblers are just homemade, but I've got a project, and by next year I'll be also like able to send bubblers to people, like proper, like good quality made bubblers. Yeah, so that's one of my side projects that I'll be taking care of over the winter, you know. So the bubbler is fantastic because we're able to specify how much pressure we want the person to create, whether it's just enough to build sensitivity or a little bit more to build a little bit of strength, confidence, and control. And also with each bubble, we lose volume, which is simulating the reduction of volume that we experience as pressure increases when we go down to depth, right? So we're training two things. We see how much pressure we're creating or releasing, and we get to train in the reduction of volume that we're experiencing on a dive. So it's like a mega useful tool. If you don't have one of those and you got like $170 or $80 or euros you want to spend, then the EQ tool is super useful. again, you get like visual feedback on the pressure you're creating. Your tool releases air like as you're equalizing, which also simulates the depth. Although I've heard people can't get hold of them now. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, so this is what Harry's talking about. It's, you know, there's a bit of a price tag on it, but it connects to your phone. You can get a very nice graphic readout of the pressure you're giving. It can be a really useful learning tool, but yeah, they're a bit pricey, and they seem to be out of production at the moment, but I have it on good authority from the owner of the company that any day now there'll be a whole batch of slightly improved Mark IIIs that are coming out. Yeah, we should have had those in August apparently. Yeah. So yeah, definitely. But I think the overarching thing, whether you use a bubbler, whether you use balloons, whether you use the Uber tool, is you've got to train your EQ. If you're going to spend 2 months away from the water, you've got to do something. Don't expect to do nothing and then get back to the water and be smashing good depths. You know, you've got to have some kind of a program. And I'd always lean to a slightly more focused program. There's a bit of like base, you know, base in inverted commas, base training, general EQ drills that should be worked on, but targeting your specific issue is really important, I think.
Yeah, and just like in general, we can always be building more and more awareness and control of everything that we need, right? So you don't even really need a tool. Like I remember when I was really starting to work on my equalization in the beginning, I would just use my hand, right? So we have all these fancy tools, but I can practice my mouthfeel and I can practice management. I can start to build awareness of when I have pressure and when I don't, like just with my hand. And I'm going to do a little demo so you can see. And it can last a long time. I can make it last longer than what I can hold my breath, right? So I'm going to do like a quick mouthfeel and I'm going to let little bits of air out of my nose. And this is also like a bit of a skill separate from mouthfeel. Just to show without anything at all, you can still practice like a proper mouthfeel, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I could make it last longer if I didn't want to lose air after each equalization, for instance, but I don't like holding my breath.
Yeah, yeah, and anyone tuning in without context would find this call really weird. Yeah, but that's ideal. You know, yeah, you can register that you can limit the amount of air that's leaking out. And that's a very sort of basic DIY dry equalization drill. So
and it's there all the time, right? You're in an elevator going up.
Yeah.
Nobody
exactly.
That's in there, right? So you don't freak anybody out. You've got a minute to burn. Just take a mouthful and practice. It's like a hand.
And that means people have no excuses. People have no excuses to not train. Oh, I forgot my Uber tool. Oh, I forgot my balloon.
Yeah.
Rubbish.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even what I do, like just doing normal things in life, I'm just paying attention to what's happening with my tongue, my soft palate, my glottis, you know, like what happens when you cough, you know?
Yeah.
What exactly is happening?
Yeah.
So all these, we're always using these parts of the body like unconsciously, but we need to develop like a conscious control and feeling for these parts of the body, no? And you can do that at any time when you're breathing through your nose. Where is your tongue in that moment? You don't feel it normally, but you can bring your attention there.
Yeah. Yeah, those are kind of drills and techniques that I run through people just getting into the very beginning steps of freediving equalization. You get them to do basic everyday movements, and then you get them to describe back to you like what's actually happening. You know, cough, sneeze, you know, all of these things like describe to me. Yeah, it's really, really good thing because obviously, I'm sure you agree the first step is building people's awareness because without awareness they can't tell you what they're doing, and then you can't help to fix them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we rely on feedback, and sometimes like that first question, the feedback's a little bit cryptic, and we've got to somehow decipher
Yeah.
what they mean. But the better the awareness, the more accurate the feedback, the more accurate our advice can be from that point.
Yeah. And like Orendon's question is probably two-pronged really, because he asked about EQ adaptations and depth adaptations. Depth adaptations might be slightly more challenging, perhaps, depending how you want to go about it. There's obviously basic stretches, keeping yourself supple in the areas that count. You can get quite in depth with that. I was doing at one time a lot of RV work in swimming pools in London as an experiment, and that seemed to help. But I think again that was more of a mental adaptation. Have you got any sort of let's say have you got any in water, shallow water stuff that you would recommend for people who are away from deep water, who want to keep their depth adaptation?
Well, maybe we can clarify depth adaptation a little bit, because I don't so much believe in like adaptation. Adaptation meaning the body is changing.
Yeah.
And I think you can get yourself used to it, so the body starts to relax and do the right thing. But if you are trained and you really know how to react to depth, how to react to pressure, then I think you can do that without any depth adaptation.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Okay.
maybe like a shout out to Andrea Zuccari, since we're talking about equalization, and he was really a pioneer, I think, when it came to breaking down that skill and communicating that skill to people. And I remember having a conversation with Andrea, and he was telling me like he can have big gaps away from depth. So he would go home for 7 months at a time to Italy and do no long stretching, no nothing. And every time for like the last 10 years, every time he got back to the center, on the first day, he would do 100 meters on the sled, no warm up, right? So what does that tell us about depth adaptation? If this guy can go to 100 meters without one single long stretch in 7 months, one single dive in 7 months. For me, and this also like is in line with my experience, for me, it's more like do you know what to do? Do you know how to relax? Do you know how to allow the body to accept the pressure? Do you know how to equalize? If you can do these two things, then depth adaptation, it's not really relevant.
Yeah.
You know, depth adaptation is creating these things, right? So by doing RV shallow or FRC shallow, like this type of thing, you're just getting yourself used to the pressure, and slowly you start to be able to accept the pressure, right? But if you just know how to accept the pressure, you don't need to go through that process of adaptation, which is what happened to me over the years, you know?
Yeah.
But still, if you don't spend a lot of time in the water, then you can keep yourself used to that pressure, let's say, right? And things like, well, anything close to RV dry is really good. So there's always the classic Uddiyana Bandha that everybody does. There's also, you do an exhale just the same as Uddiyana Bandha. And I think this one's maybe a little bit more specific to freediving. We do a complete exhalation. Now, with Uddiyana Bandha, normally we would relax the abs, open the chest, right? We relax the chest and drop the diaphragm, right? If you can't feel your diaphragm, you just push the belly out. The only way the belly can get pushed out is through the drop of the diaphragm, right? So it's the same. And this is you're gonna feel like a pull on the glottis. You're gonna feel a little bit of a stretch in the trachea. Be like gentle and careful with this. And this one is great for creating some flexibility in the trachea. You can also do these like while you're practicing equalization drills. And I know, like, to talk about Andrea again, I know Andrea was big into getting people to do Uddiyana Bandha while they were doing like mouthful drills on the bubbler or whatever tool. Bubbler was his favorite tool.
Doing those as well.
Yeah. But for me personally, I tend not to do that. Because people already have like a lot of bad habits, and if you create the connection between equalizing and opening the chest, or equalizing and dropping the diaphragm, well, that's the exact wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
If you want to be like comfortable and relaxed and allow the body to adapt to the pressure, right? We need complete relaxation. And already, like, I'm sure it's something that you work on. When people are like, don't fully get equalization yet, you see them doing some things, and when it gets tricky, they tighten up, like literally physically. The muscles of their body tighten up. So for me, when people are doing equalization drills, I'm always just trying to get them to be able to relax more and more and more. You know, so I want to create the connection with equalization and physically relaxing the body.
Yeah.
To get them to do Oriana Banda or something else, it's like, it's not what I want them to do. It's not the habit that I want to create. But if you're already like at a high level, you can do that. So then you're just killing two birds with one stone, right? You're creating much less pressure in the lungs, creating a bit of physical adaptation, and you're working your equalization drills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's loads of fantastic points. Jesus, we could talk on that question forever. But I definitely like and relate to what you were saying about knowing how to relax. Obviously, back in the day when I was a landlocked freediver, I was trying to get inventive. You know, I was stuck in London and I wanted to be in the water no matter what, even if it was at the bottom of a manky council-run swimming pool. I just wanted to be in. So we were getting quite inventive. But actually, over the years, I realised that if your mind allows the body to do its job, that's what you have to do, because the chest, everything that needs to compress, it's just muscle and sinew. It will do exactly what you tell it, and if you tell it the wrong thing, it'll bite you. You know. So if you're able to allow it to do its job. Which for me is sort of the main cornerstone of my, I can sort of relate to, maybe I'm not going to 100 on the sled after a 7-month break, but I can definitely progress back up to reasonable depth very quickly. For me, adaptation is much more of a mental adaptation than a physical. Yeah, I love that point. Yeah. Okay. Right, let's pick another question. We've got loads. Okay, there was another question about how to train mouthful so as not to swallow dry, but I think some of the things you mentioned are just ideal for that. You know, doing prolonged periods of exhale mouthful training.
I think there's more to talk about to do with swallowing mouthful, for sure.
It's a huge subject,
go into that. So, like in the freediving industry, like in this world that we live in, a lot of people talk about like strengthening the glottis or having a weak glottis. But if you're able to like live a normal life, you have this like a normal strength of glottis. Like you don't have a weak glottis, right? If you can cough, if you can like take a breath, hold that breath and lift something heavy, essentially do a Valsalva and brace to lift something heavy, like your glottis is strong, right? That's putting a ton of pressure on the glottis, much more than what you need to equalize. So I think too many people focus on creating like a strong glottis and not just like thinking about, well, why, if my glottis is strong, why am I swallowing that air? Why can I not hold my mouthful, right? So what I find is most times not like a weak glottis, almost never. The only people who really need specific glottis work, in my experience, is people who can't even do one single frenzel equalization. And what I find is that they struggle to hold air above the glottis, right? Like as soon as they can bring some more up, like I can coach them to do an end charge or something, they'll bring it up and then it will just go straight back down. And they'll be doing the movement right and everything. I can see everything happening, but there's no air trapped there in the first place for them to pressurize, you know?
Yeah, that's right.
This is like the only circumstance where somebody really needs to build like a very good control of the glottis. I'm not saying they have a weak glottis, but they need the ability to hold that air, and somehow there's like an aversion to holding air above the glottis. They don't like it instinctively, so they don't do it. Of course, it can be, right? And it just takes like often a ton of time and patience, you know, and quite often these people only try like during the course or when they come back for training, and they're not doing the work in between because they still haven't tasted free diving, right? They can't frenzel till they go into like 5 meters. It takes like just certain people who are super inspired who put in the work to develop that control. But to go back to swallowing, most of the people watching this know how to frenzel, or probably learning mouthful, like either mastering it or learning it. And in my experience, the causes of swallowing the mouthful is, first of all, like making too much pressure, right? If you're just making like a ton of pressure, and this is a habit that so many people have, and the deeper they go, the more pressure they start to create, until like the glottis just opens. The next thing would be like very poor management of the mouthful, and then just things get like super confusing for them. Feels like they're having to make tons of pressure, but they're not actually making the pressure, because it's like how much you squeeze and push, and then how much pressure that creates. So often, I'll have a feedback like, all right, equalization got like much harder, and I'll be like, no, it just got harder to make the amount of pressure you need to equalize. Let's say you need this much pressure, right? That's not going to change throughout the dive unless your tube starts to close up, right? You need this much pressure. But if you're equalizing in the wrong way with mouthful, or if you don't have enough air in frenzel, you'll need more and more effort just to create this much pressure. Right? So equalization shouldn't get harder if you're doing it right. It's going to feel the same level of ease the whole time. If it's getting harder, it means like you're not equalizing the right way for that volume of air, right? It's only like when I do my equalization drills, it's only like the last 2 equalizations that I really feel like I'm having to compress a lot, because I'm almost at like what we could call like the residual volume of my equalization.
But I would, if everything goes well, I would never be at that stage on an actual dive. That's the stage you get to in a drill only, really.
I've been in that stage plenty of times.
Naughty boy. It's only you down there that can grasp yourself up, though.
Yeah, but I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Like when I was doing 60, that was the edge of my equalization. When I was doing 70, that was the edge. When I was doing 80, that was the edge. Like when you're doing 60 meters, you don't need a 100-meter mouthful. You just need to get to 60. And there's nothing wrong with being out of air. There's something wrong with like riding your ears, you know? Like actually managing these smaller amounts of air is something that you got to get comfortable and get used to, you know? Because it's something that a lot of people, they stress out in that moment. And it doesn't have to be like that, right? The more you experience it, the more relaxed you can be just managing the last couple of equalizations. It doesn't mean you need to tense up. It doesn't mean you need to try and reverse back and bring more air. You can just let everything get more and more compressed, smaller and smaller, just get those last couple of equalizations out without it causing any anxiety or stress or any weird reactions that shouldn't happen, you know?
And that's the part of the mouthful, the deepest part that people tend to go to the least, or when they are there, it's in the most kind of mentally stressful part of the dive, which sort of makes things fall apart. So I like to find ways to kind of mimic that deepest part of the dive in shallower water, so we can get the volume. You know, there's no point in going there 2-3 times a week, whereas you can go there 10 times in a session if you get inventive.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Again, I think we could do a whole episode on that, but we better skip on. There's a question from Jasper at Sea. He says, why is it that some people can only equalize when their head is facing the surface? I think you touched on that a couple of minutes ago when you talked about being able to generate pressure and stuff like that. People have the air there, but they're just unable to sort of lock onto it and they're moving air in between lungs and mouth all the time. When they're upside down, it's such a foreign environment for some people that the management just falls to pieces. So for me, that's a lack of being able to sort of grip the air and generate the pressure they need.
Yeah, I think like again, it kind of goes back to, well, you'll be able to valsalva deeper. So if you're just not equalizing right, you'll be able to do it deep down than head down. And then the other side is cycling the air becomes easier, right? So just a relaxation of the glottis will bring air like automatically. And then even if you are frenzeling well, you'll be able to frenzel a little bit deeper. So like people who can frenzel, they're making the pressure, the glottis is closed, they're compressing the air, but can't frenzel deep, right? Or struggling around 10 or 15 or 20. Often the problem is cycling the air, right? So are they reverse packing or are they end charging?
Yeah.
Being head up makes it easier and simpler to cycle. So they don't have anything wrong with them. There's nothing physically wrong. It's just a little bit less complicated, a little bit easy to cycle the air so they can continue to do their frenzel. So they have literally air to compress and push into the ears, you know.
Yeah, cool. This is slightly away from EQ maybe, but Kostek is asking ideas for a training cycle to dive deeper. He's sort of listed gym, fitness, dynamic training, etc. Yeah, training cycles. I think there's a lot of misconceptions around training cycles. I hear the word peaking all the time in Dahab, and I think people do not have a concept. And I know it's something that you know a lot about because I've seen your sports library and you've read some really incredible books about this. So maybe we could just sort of dispel some myths about peaking and sort of how long these things take. People are going into sort of a weight training cycle like a month or 6 weeks before a comp and thinking that's enough time. What are your thoughts on stuff like that?
Well, like always when you're trying to decide like how you need to train, the first thing you got to think about is what's holding you back.
Yeah, identify the weakness. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's got to be the priority of the training cycle. So if you're already like an active person, you know, like 60 meters should be easy physically, right? You don't need to you don't need to create adaptation to do it in any of the disciplines except like no fins, let's say.
Fins, yeah.
So first of all, I would say, okay, what is it that I need to work on? And you would have like your list of these things. Like, what is the major priority? What is it that's holding me back? And then what would be the next thing and the next thing and the next thing? And then you want to more or less have everything balanced. So there is nothing holding you back, right? It's just how long it takes you to accept you're capable of doing this new depth, right? Because we have our comfort zone, and we can go a little bit into the mental side like this. When we're talking about flow, this is the ideal state that we want to be in when we free dive. Flow, you were only able to be in flow when we have like a certain amount of challenge in relation to our skill. Yeah. And it's like this challenge is perception of challenge. It's not actual challenge because our skills can be far beyond what the depth that we're actually doing. But if we perceive that depth as hard or beyond what we're capable of, we're going to start, the stress is going to rise beyond the point where we're capable to just perform well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So even if you've done your periodization, everything is in place. Sometimes it just takes some repetitions and a slow logical progression to go deeper. But that's like another thing. But yeah. So ideally, even if you have done a full periodization, everything's in place, everything is all good, then you're still capable of progressing and going deeper. But it's not like you can add 20 meters in a week or 2 weeks, right? Because the subconscious just can't accept such a big progression normally. Like a really good quote, another Andrea quote, Andrea Zakari. I was talking to him about people who got deep like super quick, you know, and he said the only people that can go deep quick are crazy or stupid.
Yeah.
And that made me feel like happy about my slow progression, you know, or my like structured progression. Like as I was moving through the meters, I like would limit myself to 10 meters a year. And for this reason, right, I wanted to do my repetitions. I wanted to have like a super solid base before I would then add another 10. Well, yeah, I've kind of circled around the actual question, right, for periodization. So what is the adaptation you want to create? What is the skill that you want to build? And how long does it take, right? That's what you've pretty much got to think about. Something that I was always very conscious of and aware of is not doing too much for the depth I'm asking myself to do, right? So like we were saying, if you're just in okay shape, you can do 60, right? If you know how to equalize, you know how to, you're comfortable, you've got all the skills in place, just with a general level of fitness, 60 is fine.
Yeah.
In 70, 80, I've seen out of shape people go like much deeper. Wait, now I've like lost track of what I was talking about.
So for a 60, you have, most people have the skill. Yeah, go on, sorry.
Yeah. So if you want to do 60 and you're putting all your energy into weight training and you want to be able to deadlift 200 kilos or 250 kilos, you're wasting a ton of energy. And then, okay, so now you can deadlift 200 kilos and you want to go to 70, that means what? You've got to deadlift 230 kilos. What about when it's time to do 100? You're doing a 500 kilos deadlift.
That's true, yeah.
So like, I was always aware of that, right? I wanted to train harder for 70 than I did for 60, which means I can't train as hard as I can when I'm doing 60. You know, a lot of the time, the training we do, the periodization we do, it's more just to give us like the confidence that we can do it, you know? Okay, and now I'm stronger, I'm fitter, I have a better apnea, I'm better with my equalization drills, I've improved all these things beyond what I was doing last year when I was doing 60. So now, because of this, I believe I can do 70. And doing the actual dives is then like just proving what you already believe, you know?
Yeah.
You there, or did I just blow your mind?
No, you're there. You're there. Yeah, I think those are fantastic answers. What I like, I always use this as a bit of a confidence builder. I use that exact example of a 60-meter dive. I describe it to people who are stressing, and I just, you know, letting people know that you already have the fitness to do a 60-meter dive. It's not particularly demanding. You don't need to put on 10 kilos of muscle. You know, you need to work out what your weaknesses are and target them, and that's what I think is lacking in general freediving knowledge. I didn't have that knowledge, you know, years ago when I first got into freediving. I didn't know where to put my effort, and I had very few people around me that could guide me that way. But there's a lot of good coaches around now. 2 of them are on this call that can, you know, help sort of guide people. And it's lack of direction, I think, which is holding a lot of people back. You know.
Yeah. It's got to be guided. That's why, like, it's individual coaching that we do, right? Because we need to look at the individual as a whole. We do run our tests. We see, like, okay, what is holding this person back, and then we can design the correct way forward for that. And I've seen, like, so many people over the years. It's almost always skill. It's not like this person's not strong enough or fit enough. I've almost never had to send someone to the gym to get them deeper. It's always just some aspect of skill. Even if their issue is just feeling like very tired and lactic on the dive, without even getting them stronger. Like I remember I was doing this with Bianca Sun Young Kim. She really always struggled with free immersion. But we could just adapt her free immersion to make her able to still do the performance with the same level of conditioning and strength and everything, right? Just to give an example of what I was working on with B, she was always doing like big, long, like classic pulls, right? So
Yeah.
the first part of the pull, it's a big muscle, the back and a little bit of the bicep. The second part of the pull is just tricep, right?
Mm.
And the tricep is just a small muscle, like a very small muscle. So this second part of the pull is quite a lot of effort, and we're going to start to load that muscle with lactate depleted of oxygen, and it's going to become tired quite quickly. So we started to do like more half pulls, like you see Fatima do. A lot of the girls who are doing deep free immersion, they'll be letting go like somewhere around the sternum or stomach.
Yeah,
They're not completely,
to avoid overloading that tricep.
yeah, exactly for that reason. And like you still have the triceps there, right? So if you've saved the triceps for the majority of the dive and your back starts to get loaded with lactate, then you can start to do some longer pulls as well, you know?
Mm.
So there's always like ways around things. People who, and it's quite often like not necessarily the logical thing, or at least we can say the quickest, easiest solution to the problem isn't necessarily what you might initially think about.
Yeah.
You know. So another example is people that get contractions on the descent and start training CO2, right? Because they want to try and like get used to CO2 and not get contractions on the descent.
Mm.
Well, logically, you and I know you shouldn't have built CO2 to the point where you get contractions on the descent, right?
Yeah.
So something else is up. Quite often, it's just the inability to relax, like we were talking about in the beginning of the session, or something to do with equalization, which causes stress, which causes contractions on the way down. Right, so just by fixing equalization, I've had people come to me who've never done a dive without contractions.
Yeah.
And just by fixing equalization, they're doing the entire descent and half the ascent with no contractions now. You know, they've never done a descent without contractions.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about good divers, people who are in the world championships right now, you know.
Yeah. Oh man, another fantastic answer to a fantastic question. Okay, let's skip on. This is one that this comes up daily in Dahab. How deep should you be able to frenzel before switching to mouthfill? This is, you know, there's some key areas. Personally, I had these struggles. I did my first course in a cold quarry, and I struggled to equalize at 12 or 16 meters because it was just cold and scary and dark. Worked through it, and then there's another sort of equalization barrier approaching 25 into 30, and I think it's around those areas where some people, especially in a place like Dahab, where they're surrounded by a lot of dinner time talks about EQ, and they might get recommended, oh, it's time for you to learn mouthfill. But you know, the question is, how deep should you be able to frenzel before you think about mouthfill? What are your thoughts on that?
So it depends from case to case. I don't really have like a hard and fast rule. For me, the correct path is always the path of least resistance. So when someone's coming to me for coaching, for instance, I want to get them to 30 meters because 30 meters is the depth that I like to train everything, right?
Yeah.
We can train the first part of the descent. I can overweight them. We can train and when I say overweight, I mean 1 kilo extra. We can train the free fall. We can train the 10. There's a lot we can do in 30 meters. But if somebody can't get there, then, you know, at first, for the first few days, I'll try and talk them through cycling, right? I'll talk them through how to reverse pack. If reverse packing's not working, I'll talk them through how to end charge. If end charge is still not happening and taking like tons of time, we can even go into like mouthfill, right? Whatever is easiest for this person to get to 30. So like, I don't think there's like really an answer, you know. If you're struggling with frenzel and just learning mouthfill means you're not struggling anymore, and just learn mouthfill, like there's not, you know, like I remember back in the days, I don't hear it so much anymore, but people used to say, no, mouthfill is dangerous because you'll be able to equalize deep even though you're not ready for it. And if you learn to frenzel deeper, that means you're relaxed.
Yeah.
Well,
I've
who
heard
can
that.
mouthfeel deep when they're not relaxed? Right? You need
Yeah.
more control and awareness to mouthfeel deep. So, I mean, the logic doesn't stand
No.
in that I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I'd say rather than like having a minimum depth that I let people frenzel to, I have more like a maximum depth that I let people frenzel to.
Okay. Yeah.
Then for sure I make them switch the mouthfeel, right? Like, because even if someone's a natural frenzler, generally speaking, by the time they hit 40 to 50 meters, it's just going to run out. And then we have to take and step back again and then mouthfeel all over when we're just in the middle of the peaking doing our deep diving. So like I just preempt it because I know I've done it like tons of times.
Yeah.
You know, okay, like let's see how your frenzel's doing, and then boom, 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 we go down, and then okay, now it's not working, and then I've had people, I'm not going to mention any names, like for weeks training to get an extra couple of meters on their frenzel. I was like, man, if we just spent 1 week learning mouthfeel, equalization is not an issue anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So I agree. I don't think there's a minimum where that people should be doing frenzel but I do think the maximum starts to come into play. You know, stressing to squeeze out a 50 with frenzel when you were in your 40s, you could have just switched over to mouthfeel and made your life a lot easier. Yeah.
Yeah, and even like the athletes some athletes that I spoke to who do frenzel deep, like at some point they start to squeeze, like almost always, right?
Yeah.
So it's even if you're a natural frenzel and you're capable, like some people are capable of doing 80, 90, 100 meters with frenzel, they're still limited, right? So at some point they are going to have to switch, and that can be like totally demoralizing to do, like when you're a 100-meter diver to now struggle to get to 50 or whatever.
Yeah, and you know, mouthfeel is by far, you know, a really safe way to equalize deep, rather than frenzel that's not 100% under control and perfect down deep can get you into a bit of trouble, you know.
Hey man, like I'm gonna ask my own question. Do you you know when you're watching Dive Eye now and they can do this zoom in?
Yeah.
I'm seeing like maybe it's just me, but I think I'm seeing like quite a lot of deep divers reverse packing at depth actually.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's hard to distinguish between someone like chewing on their air, but some of them it's like a really clear reverse pack.
Yeah.
And that's interesting. That's something I would like to play about with if I had more time to train at depth. I would like to just to see, because if you could, I don't know, if you could safely top up your mouthfeel down at 60, 70, 80, I mean, that's 160 meter mouthfeel there, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. But then if you spoke to Andrea, he would be like, yeah, but a good mouthfeel will also get you to those depths, and there's no chance of squeezing your lungs with the top up. Yeah. But I think like what I'm taking from it is like so many people who get to these depths, it's like a very instinctive thing, and they have like a certain natural ability which most people aren't gonna have, you know, like most people are never gonna be able to reverse back at 80.
No.
You know. So I think maybe like that's something that's been separating like a lot of the people who can go really deep. It's not necessarily like full mastering of equalization. It's like this sort of like genetic ability of their body to be able to bring up air without totally squeezing their lungs, you know.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of interesting things with Dive Eye. Yeah. What do you think of this fingers on the mouth, loading the mouth, Phil? What's your thoughts on that?
It's not necessary. Like Tanya, my wife, she was like struggling, like charging a big mouthfeel without losing bubbles out of her mouth, and she kept like asking me this question, and I'm like, if you just train right, you'll be able to keep the lips closed. It's like, no, but when I do a big mouthfeel, like every time I lose out my lips, I'm like, yeah, now, but just keep training, like keep practicing, you'll be able to do it, you know. I don't want you going down looking like Dr. Evil. Like, it's embarrassing. Like, my wife is not gonna charge their mouthful like that. And now, like, yeah, she is capable of fully charging, pressurizing everything, like with her lips closed. So it's like putting a band-aid over a certain lack of skill,
Yeah.
A lack of ability. But like, whatever, like I say, path of least resistance. If you don't want to practice that skill specifically, and you don't mind doing this, although it is going to create more drag,
Yeah.
it's going to affect your dive like negatively. Himani's listening. Okay.
Yeah.
In cold water, it's a story. I'm diving in 30 degrees. You guys, crazy people in the lake, do whatever you like.
I can see that when your lips are so numb and blue, that could really help in 10-degree water. Yeah, actually.
I'm sure. But these people are different types of humans.
Yeah, they're crazy.
I don't know what they're doing in those lakes.
I feel cold here in Cyprus. I've just come from a summer in Dahab, and I'm trying to get used to the cold conditions here in Cyprus. It's challenging. Yeah, maybe I'll put my fingers on my lips.
What is the?
It's like, I mean, surface is lovely. Surface is 27, 28, but it drops to about 18 down at 70, 80. So, yeah, it does get a bit fresh. Yeah, below 20, it drops by sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 degrees. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, just adaptation is proving a bit challenging with that.
One
right, zippy
thing with the finger on the lip, and it's just like pet peeve, right? That's really one of my pet peeves. Is like, okay, like maybe you need it to do your full charge, yeah, but then like you see people like, okay, they've done their charge, let's say at 25 meters, and then they're still at 6 meters, like 80, this, like the fuck, like, okay, do it, but you only need to hold it for a few seconds, right? And then you can like let go and create like a streamlined position and enjoy your free fall instead of going the whole way like this. Like,
have you, Christine Zippy, she's asking it. Have you got any experience with leaky tear ducts and how to deal with that? I only get a leaky tear duct if I'm super congested and I can equalize in it. I feel a bubble. But some people, they've just got these huge tear ducts. I've seen it. They equalize and they've got bubbles coming out their eyes, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I've coached, I think, like 3 people with that issue.
Yeah.
The most genius thing that I saw, he like, you know, these Speedo nose clips like William Trubridge uses? The really like basic metal ones. Yeah. So he put some fishing wire around it and had the nose clip just perfectly shaped so it blocked off his tear duct. And then the wire was like going, I think it was like under his eye and around his head, so it like kept pressure on his eye.
Wow.
And like literally closed off the ear duct with this nose clip. And that was working. Yeah, it was working like perfectly for him. So like Bianca again, I was talking about her earlier, a Korean free diver, lovely person. She used to dive down like this, literally closing. It was just one eye, I think. She would literally dive down like this, closing the tear duct. People have found like swimming goggles where if you put them in a certain way and like tighten up the swimming goggles, you know, can put a bit of pressure onto the tear duct. And then I'd say like also just being aware that you're not over pressurizing, right? Like it's possible like this tube is just super open and you're not over pressurizing, but maybe you're making more pressure than what you really need. So you create a certain amount of pressure, a little bit, it equalizes the sinuses. A little bit more, it equalizes the ears. You can stop there, but if you make more, maybe then that air is pushed through the tear duct. So that's a few ideas for you to play with.
Yeah, I definitely, first thing I'd look at is limiting, I mean, you can get super inventive, but I'd look at limiting the pressure you're giving, because it's actually, you know, I'm not sure of the anatomy going all the way from the sinuses up into the tear duct, but it's quite a way for a bit of air to travel. And I'm sure you could hopefully equalize with less pressure. Just get it into the ears, stop there, exactly like what you said. Yeah. Yes. We got a question from Julia, shades in blue. This is probably from an instructor's point of view. How to make EQ exercises more appealing. I've never had, for myself, I've never had to make them more appealing because I know that I have to do them to get better and go deeper. So I enjoy doing them. I think this maybe crosses into like enjoying the training process, really. But maybe she's asking about how to make her students do their homework.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like keep it in mind because the people that come here for coaching, we do an hour equalization training every day.
Yeah.
Like every dive day, do an hour equalization, then an hour theory afterwards. So I just try and vary what it is that we're doing. I'll always keep it more or less specific to what that individual needs. So whatever the issue is, I'll just invent a drill or remember a drill that's good for that issue. Well, I'll just approach it with different ways, whether it's with the bubbler or the balloon or with your finger or with the EQ tool. And then we can also do it in different situations. We can like get competitive and make competitions out of it, or do it like during like lying down in a static or with apnea squats or, whatever. So just to sort of get a bit creative. Another thing which is really nice is teaming people up to like actually help each other, and that works really well because when someone's just doing their own thing, it's great because they can feel what it is that they need to feel. If you give them a mirror, they can see. But when you ask them to watch somebody else and give somebody else feedback, I think it just solidifies what's happening like a little bit better in their minds.
Yeah, that's a very very sort of classic teaching tool. You can prove your understanding of a subject when you can impart that knowledge onto someone else, and it's a really good way to test someone's knowledge. That's a lovely idea, and it gets people thinking, gets people describing it in different ways. Again, it's raising that curve of awareness.
Yeah, and I think even for you as an instructor, it keeps you stimulated rather than just giving the same exercises over and over. You've got to try and get like a little bit creative,
Yeah. That's a nice question with a nice answer, actually, from an instructor's point of view. Yeah, I like that. Okay. Another one from Freedive Prana. Constant pressure versus sequential. This is a sort of ongoing debate, really. Well, which one are you?
I'm a sequential dude.
Mm-hmm.
I use it, I teach it. If somebody's like obsessed with they need to do constant, then whatever, I can use it and I can teach it. But I just find like people tend to have problems with, they're more likely to have certain problems with constant pressure than sequential. For instance, if somebody is swallowing the mouthful, then I'll definitely start to steer them towards sequential rather than constant. The tricky thing for me about constant is you're not getting really feedback from the pop of the ears. So you're making more pressure than what you need to hold the ears open, right? Or at least, let's say, the pressure you need to hold the ears open. But unless you already have like a really good awareness, you don't know if, like, let's say you need this, you don't know if you're here, or like through the roof, right? And what tends to happen is people go through the roof. Yeah. Then they swallow the air. So like with sequential, at least you feel, okay, I've done the pop and then I've released the pressure. And that's, for me, like when I'm teaching equalization, and this also goes back to swallowing the mouthful, like I don't just focus on, can somebody make pressure? Can somebody squeeze the cheeks, use the jaw, use the tongue? It's also like, can they release the pressure? So with sequential, more important thing is like dropping the pressure between the equalizations, because that time there's nothing pushing on the glottis, or there's the minimum amount pushing on the glottis, right? And then we can just quickly, like a snap, boom, like you would with friends, all right? Yeah. One quick equalization, and then again, there's no more pressure pushing on the glottis, or minimum pressure pushing on the glottis. The times when I would use constant is towards the end of mouthful, when the air is behind the tongue, TKH, and someone has the habit of reverse packing, right? So then I like to keep people dry, and when we're doing drills in the water, to go into constant and hold the constant. Because if you have constant pressure, you cannot reverse back.
Yeah.
Right. So it can help them just to get used to the volume going down, getting less and less. And if we see or they feel they reduce the pressure and then all of a sudden it's easier to equalize, well, then they can start to make that connection. Ah, okay, that was a reverse pack, you know?
Yeah.
Because like we touched on earlier on, if you're doing mouthful, it's because you can't reverse back to these depths. And if you try and reverse back to these depths, you're probably going to squeeze your lungs. So one part of learning mouthful is overwriting this reverse packing instinct, right? Getting rid of this concept, like if I don't have much air, I can just bring more air, right? Because that's super dangerous at depth.
Yeah, fantastic. Sorry, I've lost track. Right, okay, look, we've been chatting for about an hour. Let's wind up with one little question. Tam's awesome. Tam is awesome, right? She just started freediving a little while ago. She got really interested in safety diving. Her first ever live rescue was in Sharm. She pulled someone up from 30. And
wow.
She did so well, and that's the first ever time she's had to do it. It was in competition, and she rescued a very deep black